Just because someone is a big-time college football player or an athlete, it does not excuse them from breaking the law. In today's video, we have a terribly tragic story that will ruin the lives of many people. The subject of today's video had one of the best single seasons for a wide receiver in Florida State history, was supposed to be a high-end draft pick, and had an extremely bright future ahead of him. Unfortunately, it would surface that he was a part of a murder back in 2018, and because of that, not only is his football career over, but he may be in serious trouble for the rest of his life. In today's video, we're going to tell the story of a bright young star who went from a Florida State superstar to potentially a jail cell. So without further ado, let's get started. Unless you're a Florida State or a Seattle Seahawks fan, you more than likely do not know who the subject of today's video is. And as I previously stated, he had one of the best single seasons in Florida State football history just a couple years ago and was seen as a top-end NFL draft prospect. As of a couple days ago, he was charged with felony murder, and this will have a drastic effect on the rest of his life, and because of that, the Seahawks released him. But before we can talk about what would go wrong for him, we need to go back in time and see how Terry became a big name to begin with. He grew up in a small town called Ashburn, Georgia, with a population just under 5,000. It's not exactly the nicest town in the world, and Terry's goal was to bring his family out of the town and eventually give back to his hometown. Terry originally didn't want to play football though. Basketball was his favorite sport, and he was extremely talented at it. Unfortunately, if he really wanted to make it anywhere in sports, he would need to play football. Things would change as a new head coach would come into their high school program and basically told Terry that his future was in football. From there, he played every single position on the field and was one of the best players in the state. He eventually got good enough that he started to get big-time offers, but his academic scores were not very high. Because of that, he had a lot of interest from big-time programs. He had offers from Florida, Georgia, Auburn, Florida State, and others. He finished his senior year with 40 catches for 1,187 yards and 19 scores, and more importantly, he'd helped lead his team to an 8-4 record in its first playoff win since 2008. At 6'5", Terry was one of the most athletic players his high school coach had ever seen, and he was going to be big time. After Florida State wide receiver Travis Rudolph decided to go to the NFL, Terry and his teammate Ontario Wilson decided to commit to the Seminoles. He ended up choosing the Noles over the likes of Auburn and Florida, and had this to say, quote, "I've liked the Noles for a long time. I like how the coaches are with the players, and also their ability to use bigger receivers. So this one is big. I committed to FSU. This is where I've wanted to be." According to 24/7 Sports, Terry was a 3-star recruit, the number 52 wide receiver, and the 350th best player in the class of 2017. On some sites, he is a 4-star recruit, but for the most part, everyone knew Terry would be a contributor to the program. He had a lot of hype going into his Florida State career, with one scout having this to say, quote, "Terry is a home run threat in the passing game. He creates separation easily off the line of scrimmage, stretches the field vertically, and high points the football consistently. With his size and toughness, Terry will be a welcomed addition for the FSU offense and could quickly become a go-to target for quarterback DeAndre Francois." Going into the 2017 season, the Seminoles were under head coach Jimbo Fisher, and they had stars on offense such as DeAndre Francois, Cam Akers, and Landon Dickerson. On defense, they had guys like Derwin James and Josh Sweat, and people expected Florida State to have a huge year. They started out ranked number 3 in the country, but Terry would not be a part of this. He would decide to redshirt his freshman season, and while that happened, Florida State ended up going 7-6. A big reason for this is because DeAndre Francois got injured, and while there was a little bit of a bowl eligibility mix-up, they ended up qualifying for the Independence Bowl, and at that time, Jimbo Fisher had bolted for Texas A&M. Going into 2018, the Seminoles had hired former Oregon coach Willie Taggart to be their new head man. He brought in a new style of offense, and because of this, Terry would get a chance to play right away. In his first game against number 20 Virginia Tech, he catch his first 2 passes for 39 yards. He would catch his first touchdown against Northern Illinois, and would have his first touchdown against an ACC opponent against Louisville. He'd play solid against Clemson before he would have the game of his freshman year that showed the kind of flash that he possessed. Against number 21 NC State, he caught 5 passes for 142 yards and 2 touchdowns. From there, he had a season-high 6 catches against Notre Dame, 112 yards and a touchdown against Boston College, and 3 catches for 78 yards in a loss to number 11 Florida. Unfortunately, there was some dysfunction at Florida State during his first year, as the Seminoles would go 3-5 with a 5-7 record overall. This did not stop Terry from having a pretty good freshman campaign, as he caught a total of 35 passes for 744 yards and 8 touchdowns. He had started 11 of the team's 12 games, and the sky was honestly the limit for him. Things would get pretty interesting during the 2019 season, as after only 9 games, Willie Taggart was relieved of his coaching duties. But let's go back a little bit and go through the season first. This would be the year that he broke out, and in their first game in a loss to Boise State, he'd have 4 catches for 99 yards and a touchdown. The following week, they would barely squeak by Louisiana Monroe by way of a missed extra point, but he would tie his career high for catches in a game with 6. The following week, they would lose on the road to number 25 Virginia, and then he would catch a touchdown in a win over Louisville. He'd once again continue his good fortune against NC State as he'd catch 5 passes for 77 yards and 2 touchdowns in that game. He'd catch a touchdown against both Clemson and Wake Forest the following 2 weeks, and then he'd have the best game of his career against Boston College. On that night, he caught 7 passes for 156 yards and a touchdown, and then would finish the 2019 regular season with 7 catches for 131 yards against their rival Florida. As I previously mentioned, after Game 9, Willie Taggart was fired, and Odell Haggins was the interim head coach. They were good enough to make a bowl game, and to finish off his sophomore season, he catch 9 passes for 165 yards and a touchdown in a 20-14 loss to the Sun Devils. He became a second-team All-ACC selection as he caught 60 passes for 1,188 yards and 9 touchdowns. He could have left for the 2020 NFL Draft, but he decided to come back for his senior campaign and hopefully improve his stock. Unfortunately, that is when things would start to go downhill for him. He would appear in 5 games in 2020, and he was very hit or miss. Against Jacksonville State, he had 6 catches for 77 yards, and on the road against number 5 Notre Dame, he had 9 catches for 146 yards, but against Miami, he didn't catch a pass, and against Pitt, he only had 14 yards. He was very inconsistent. Florida State was in a whirlwind under first-year head coach Mike Norvell, and the whole 2020 season in general was just an absolute mess. He'd finish his redshirt junior campaign with 23 catches for 289 yards and 1 touchdown, and would decide to forego his last year of eligibility to be entered into the draft pool for 2021. Because of the weird 2020 season, Terry's draft stock had fallen. He was still projected to be a day 3 pick, but he'd end up going undrafted, where he was picked up by the Seattle Seahawks. In a video a few weeks ago, I talked about players whose stock crashed, and Terry was actually one of the guys I mentioned. The Seahawks have a loaded couple guys on the roster, but I thought Terry would have a chance to make his way onto the team. Unfortunately, he will never get that opportunity, as he was released just a couple days ago by the franchise, and he now has bigger problems to work with. If you go back to 2018 in the city of Ashburn, Georgia, there was apparently a gang-related shooting in which a 21-year-old woman was killed. There was apparently multiple shots fired into the crowd, and they could not pinpoint one person. While they did blame one dude, many theorized that there were multiple people involved in this, and as of last week, we got a lot more information. A grand jury in Georgia last week would end up indicting 11 other people, and Florida State wide receiver Tamorrion Terry was one of them. He's apparently been charged with felony murder, and that applies when someone commits a certain kind of felony and someone else dies in the course of it. So basically, he was messing around and shooting a gun, which was a felony, but because someone died in the process and they couldn't pinpoint exactly who it was, everyone took the fall for it. While Terry may not have been the guy who actually killed her, the jury apparently found enough to indict him, and he will likely be spending some time in jail. For now, football seems like a major afterthought for him, and I don't know if he'll ever see the field. It's terribly sad that that woman died, and rest in peace to her and prayers for her family, and I hope all the guys involved in this end up turning their lives around and learn from that terrible mistake. In 4 years with the program, Terry played in 31 games, catching 118 passes for 2,221 yards and 18 touchdowns, and had one of the best single seasons for a Florida State wide receiver in school history in 2019. It's really sad because he's a player who really made something of himself, had a terrific career, and had a potential in the game of football. You never want to see anyone go down a path like this, and I really hope that Terry ends up learning from this and becomes a better person from it. What do you guys think, though? What did you think of Tamorrion Terry? Do you think he'll ever play football again? And do you think it's fair that he should be charged with what happened? Be sure to let me know down in the comment section. Let me know another player who I can take a look at next. Subscribe if you are new to the channel. Hit that like button if you want to support today's video. And check out all my other videos on the end screen, including my video about what happened to Dylan Moses. I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.